This is Chapter 6 on Decision Making and Creativity. This presentation covers the learning objectives that will be explained through the slides. Let's start by defining decision making. It is the process of making choices among alternatives with the intention of moving toward some desired state of affairs. The decision-making process can be viewed from three paradigms, one of which is the rational choice paradigm. This can be defined as the view in decision-making that people typically do, using logic and all available information to choose the alternative with the highest value. The ultimate principle of this rational choice is subjective expected utility, which can be defined as the probability of satisfaction for each alternative. To understand subjective expected utility in practice, let's briefly look at decision-making in the hiring process. An organization typically wants to hire the best people who will provide the greatest value. This choice involves determining what the company values in its employees, such as skills and knowledge, capacity to learn, flexibility, and social skills. These features represent the utility or value employees bring to the organization. Next, the selection process gathers information about the probability that each applicant will provide each of these desired characteristics. According to the rational choice paradigm, the company chooses applicants with the highest probability of having each of the desired characteristics. In other words, it wants to choose applicants with the highest subjective expected utility. The key point from this example is that all decisions rely to some degree on the expected value of the outcomes, or the utility, and the probability of those good or bad outcomes occurring, which could be called the expectancy. When in an organization and faced with a difficult decision, the following 6 effective steps listed above can be used to help ensure the best possible rationale solutions will be decided. The steps are as follows. Step 1 is to identify the problem or recognize the opportunity. Step 2 is to choose the best possible decision, process, or style. Most often, an issue with this step is whether or not the decision maker has enough information to process, and also if the decision is programmed or not programmed. Step 3 is to develop alternative solutions. This step involves searching for ready-made solution. If this cannot be found, then a custom-made solution will need to be made. Step 4 is to choose the best solution. Step 5 is to implement the selected alternative. And step 6 is to evaluate the decision outcomes. One of the problems with the rational choice paradigm is that the model assumes people are efficient and logical information processing machines. A problem with this is that in reality, everyone is different in the sense that we all don't have the same radar when it comes to finding problems and are not able to identify them at the same time. Another problem is that it focuses on logical thinking and completely ignores the fact that emotions also have an effect on one's decision-making process. Arguably, the most important step in decision-making process is the problem identification. Problems and opportunities are practically never clearly labeled and are usually conclusions that we form from ambiguous and conflicting information. There are 5 widely recognizable concerns with the problem identification stage. They are stakeholder framing, mental models, decisive leadership, solution-focused problems, and perceptual defense. It is necessary to avoid mental models, which are visuals or relational images in your mind of the external world. These models can restrict an individual from seeing unique problems or opportunities because they produce a negative evaluation of things that are unlike a particular mental model. Decisive leadership can potentially lead an individual to quickly form an opinion without logically assessing a problem or opportunity. Perceptual defenses cause an individual to block out bad news or negative information, therefore giving him or her the inability to take complete control over a situation. Recognizing mental models and considering other perspectives of reality can help individuals identify problems and opportunities more effectively. Another way to improve problem identification is using the concept of divine discontent. Divine discontent is the notion of never being satisfied with the norm, and this aversion of complacency creates a mindset that more actively searches for problems and opportunities. In accordance with the rational choice paradigm, people rely on logic to evaluate and choose alternatives. Nobel Prize winner Herbert Simon questioned this belief, arguing that people engage in bounded rationality. This is a view that people are bounded in their decision-making process capabilities, including access to limited information processing, and tendency towards satisficing rather than maximizing when making choices. Over the years, bounded rationality has taken precedence over the rational choice paradigm in several ways due to the significance of their differences. The rational choice paradigm assumes that goals are clear, compatible, and agreed upon. However, in actuality, and according to observations from organizational behavior, goals tend to be ambiguous or in conflict with each other. In reality, decision makers cannot process information about all alternatives and their consequences, and in fact, have limited information processing abilities. For example, there are several cell phone brands to choose from that have several types of features to consider, yet individuals typically evaluate only a few brands and a few features. Another related problem is that decision makers usually evaluate alternatives sequentially rather than all at the same time. As a new alternative is presented, it is immediately compared to an implicit favorite or preferred alternative that the decision maker uses repeatedly as a comparison with other choices. People usually distort information to favor their implicit favorite over the alternative choice in a decision, oftentimes not even knowing they are doing this. A key assumption of the rational choice paradigm is that people want to choose the alternative with the highest payoff, also known as utility. Nonetheless, rather than aiming for maximization, people engage in satisficing. Satisficing is selecting an alternative that is satisfactory or good enough, rather than the alternative with the highest value or maximization. Decision makers will evaluate alternatives sequentially and select the first one perceived to be above a standard of acceptance for their needs and preferences. The more choices an individual is presented, the more the individual will have to engage in information processing and ultimately can force the individual not to make a decision at all. Opportunities are just as important as problems, but the way an opportunity is processed in our minds is totally different than a problem. Usually, an opportunity will cause a decision maker to have an emotional attachment to the opportunity, consequently motivating the decision maker to act on the opportunity without any proper evaluation. Emotions affect the evaluation of alternatives in three ways. 1. Emotions from early preferences. This states that our brain attaches specific emotions to information about each alternative, and our alternatives can be influenced by emotional markers. 2. Emotions change the decision evaluation process states that moods and emotions affect the process of our alternatives. And 3. Emotions serve as information when we evaluate alternatives. Intuition can be defined as the ability to know when a problem or opportunity exists and to select the best course of action without any conscious reasoning. The gut feeling we may sometimes get can be categorized as an emotional signal. Gut feelings are emotional signals, however, not all emotional signals are intuitions. For example, studies have shown that chessmaters receive emotional signals when they sense an opportunity while observing a chessboard. When given the opportunity, they can explain why they saw the favorable move. However, the intuition has already signaled the opportunity ahead of time. This may show to be valuable in certain instances, but in other instances, experts say that we shouldn't always trust our gut feelings because they are not always based on well-grounded facts, or information. Another emotional signal that intuition relies on is action scripting, which is a formed, programmed decision making. So now we come to employee involvement, which is the degree to which employees influence how their work is organized and carried out. There are several benefits of employee involvement. One benefit is that it helps improve decision quality by recognizing problems more quickly and defining them more accurately. When the organization's activities misalign with customer expectations, employees are usually the first to know. Secondly, it improves the number of and quality of solutions generated, which is basically saying several people working together can potentially generate more and better solutions than the same people working alone. A third benefit is that it will improve the evaluation of alternatives. More involvement brings out more diverse perspectives, tests ideas, and provides more valuable knowledge, which is important for decision making. This brings us to contingencies of employee involvement, which in other words means that the optimal level of employee involvement depends on the situation. There are 4 contingencies, which include decision structure, source of decision knowledge, decision commitment, and risk of conflict in the decision process. Right now, we will look at 2. First, let's look at decision structure. Some decisions are programmed and some are non-programmed. Programmed decisions are less likely to need employee involvement because the solutions are already worked out from past incidences. Second is the source of decision knowledge. In many cases, employees are closer to customers and production activities, so they often know where the company can save money, improve product or service quality, and realize opportunities. So now we look at the last 2. First, decision commitment. If employees are unlikely to accept a decision made without their involvement, some level of participation is usually necessary. When employees feel involved, they are more likely to become committed to the decision. Finally, we have risk of conflict. 2 types of conflict undermine the benefits of employee involvement. First, if employee goals and norms conflict with the organization's goals, only a low level of employee involvement is advisable. Second, the degree of involvement depends on whether employees will agree on the preferred solution. Characteristics of creative people. 4 of the main characteristics that give individuals more creative potentials are intelligence, persistence, knowledge and experience, independent imagination. Intelligence. Creative people have above average experience to synthesize information, analyze ideas, and apply ideas. Persistence. Creative people have persistence, which includes a higher need for achievement, a strong motivation from the task itself, and a moderate or high degree of self-esteem. Knowledge and experience. Creative people possess sufficient knowledge about and experience with the subject, essentially require existing knowledge to discover new knowledge. Independent imagination. Creative people possess cluster of personality traits and value that support an independent imagination. A high openness to experience, moderately low need for affiliation, and strong values around self-direction and stimulation. Organizational conditions supporting creativity. One of the most important conditions that support creative practice is that the organization has a learning orientation, which is that leaders recognize that employees make reasonable mistakes as part of the creative process. Motivation from the job itself is another important condition for creativity. Employees tend to be more creative when they believe their work benefits the organization and a larger society. Providing a comfortable degree of job security explains why creativity suffers during times of downsizing and corporate restructuring. Finally, some companies also support creativity by designing non-traditional workspaces such as unique buildings or unconventional office areas. Activities that encourage creativity. There are three sets of activities that encourage creativity: redefining the problem, associative play, and cross-pollination. Redefining the problem. Employees might be encouraged to revisit old projects that have been set aside. After a few months of neglect, these projects might have been seen in a new way. Another strategy involves asking people unfamiliar with the issue to explore it with you. A second set of creativity activities is associative play, which ranges from art classes to impromptu storytelling and acting. Being creative is a bit like an emotion. We need to be stimulated, explains Harriet Frost, one of the OMD specialists in building creativity. The same is true for imagination and its ability to come up with new ideas. You can't just sit in a room and devise new hundreds of ideas. Finally, the third set of activities that promote creative thinking falls under the category of cross-pollination. Cross-pollination occurs when people from different areas of the organization exchange ideas. Cross-pollination highlights the facts that creativity rarely occurs alone. Some creative people may be individualistic, but most creative ideas are generated through teams and informal social interaction.